My name is Ayu. I'm 32 years old, and I've just walked away from a 7-year relationship, not because he cheated on me, not because we stopped loving each other, but because I finally realized I was never really seen as equal in his eyes. And that realization, it broke me more than any betrayal ever could. 7 years ago, I moved to the U. From Indonesia. I came for graduate school. I was ambitious, excited, maybe a little scared. Everything was new. The language, the food, even the way people crossed the street. But I was determined to make it. A few months into school, I met Josh. He was in my economics class. Loud, funny, kind of charming in a chaotic way. We started out as friends, then best friends, and before I even realized it, we were falling asleep on FaceTime and finishing each other's sentences. We became inseparable. Dinners turned into sleepovers. Weekends turned into holidays together. His mom sent me birthday cards. His friends invited me to game night. He said he loved how independent I was, how driven. He used to say I made him want to be better. After I graduated, I landed a tech job, pretty competitive, decent pay, and yes, under an H-1B visa. Josh and I moved in together. We were happy. At least I thought we were. We had talks about the future, kids, marriage, where we'd want to settle down. He always said we were building something real. So I believed him. For 7 years, I built a life around that belief. Through career changes, deaths in the family, COVID lockdowns, we held each other up. So when my company announced potential outsourcing earlier this year, I panicked. Because as an H-1B visa holder, if I lost my job, I had 60 days. Just 60 days to either find another job, apply for another visa, or leave the country I'd called home for nearly a decade. I talked to my lawyer. One of the options, of course, was marriage. If Josh and I were to get married, I'd have a path to a green card. It wasn't how I imagined our engagement, but we'd been together for so long. It felt like a natural next step anyway. It wasn't just about the visa. It was about choosing each other, officially, fully. So, on our 7-year anniversary, I planned a quiet dinner. Nothing too fancy, just the two of us, our favorite takeout, candles, jazz in the background. Halfway through dinner, I brought it up. I told him about my visa situation. I told him I wasn't pressuring him, that I loved him, that I wanted to build a life with him. And yes, that marriage would help. But it had to be something we both wanted. I was nervous, but hopeful. And then, he said nothing. He put down his fork. He looked at me like I'd just asked him to donate a kidney. After a long silence, he said, I don't think I'm ready for that. Not until you get your green card on your own. I blinked, confused. He added, I mean, it's just, I don't want to be used. You hear these stories, you know? People marrying for visas. Used? After 7 years? I thought he was joking, but his face was dead serious. My heart sank. I asked him, do you really think I'd stay with you for 7 years just to get a visa? He didn't say yes, but he didn't say no either. That silence told me everything. The next few days were filled with awkward silences and half-hearted apologies. He said things like, I just need more time. I don't like feeling like it's only because of immigration stuff. What if we regret rushing into marriage? 7 years. That's rushing? I started to think back on our relationship, all the little comments I had brushed off, like how he always changed the subject when his friends got married, how he'd never posted me on social media, just in case work people saw, how he never once brought up visiting Indonesia with me, and worst of all, how my success slowly became something he resented. A year ago, I got promoted. I started earning more than him. At first, I thought he was proud, but slowly, he grew distant. He'd make jokes like, well, you're the rich one now, or why would you need me when you've got your tech money? I laughed it off, but deep down it hurt. Money was never the issue for me. I just wanted us to be a team. But for him, I think it bruised his ego. It got worse when some of his friends made remarks. One actually said, you sure she's not just sticking around for that green card? And instead of defending me, Josh just laughed, like it was harmless. That moment stuck with me. Then came the breaking point. I asked if he'd consider moving to Indonesia with me if things didn't work out with the visa. He laughed, like I'd asked him to move to Mars. He said, I can't just drop everything and follow you halfway across the world. And that's when it hit me. I would have done that for him, in a heartbeat, but he wouldn't even consider it for me. I suggested therapy. He said no, said he didn't want a referee in our relationship. I asked him, what are we doing then? His answer, I don't know anymore. That night, I packed a small bag and booked an Airbnb. Just for a few days, I told myself, just to clear my head. But once I was there, I realized. I wasn't confused. I wasn't unsure. I was just heartbroken, but clear. Clear that I deserved someone who chose me, fully, without conditions, without fear. It wasn't easy moving out, but in a way, it was the first step I took toward reclaiming myself. I spent the first few days in that Airbnb, not really knowing what to do with myself. I barely slept, just staring at the ceiling, wondering where everything went wrong. I felt like I had lost not only my partner, but my sense of security. I kept telling myself it would get better, that this was just a rough patch, that maybe with time things would heal. But then, as the days turned into weeks, I realized something I hadn't been willing to admit. I wasn't just losing Josh, I was losing myself. The person who had once been confident, who believed in love and in the idea of us, she was gone, and I had no idea how to get her back. One evening, I decided to call my best friend from Indonesia, Rina. I hadn't spoken to her much in the past few months, distracted by the mess I had found myself in. I needed to hear a familiar voice. Rina, I don't know what to do, I said, my voice shaking. I thought I was doing everything right, but now, nothing makes sense. She listened patiently, as I poured my heart out. Ayu, she said gently, you've been so focused on proving yourself to him, but what about proving yourself to you? That hit me hard. She was right. I had spent so many years trying to fit into someone else's idea of what our love should be, trying to prove I wasn't just some girl looking for a visa, trying to convince Josh, and maybe even myself, that I deserved his love, his acceptance. But now, I was left wondering if I had ever truly accepted myself. The next few weeks felt like a blur. I went through the motions, working during the day, and at night, I tried to keep myself busy. I met new people, went out for coffee, spent hours walking around the city, getting lost in the streets. But nothing could erase the feeling of emptiness. It was during one of those long walks through the city that something inside me clicked. I realized something. I was still waiting for Josh to come back. I was still waiting for him to apologize, to make things right. But what I was really waiting for was validation. Validation that I hadn't made a mistake by loving him. It was a hard truth to face, because the truth is, I was afraid. Afraid of what it would mean if I truly moved on. Afraid of how life would look without him. Afraid that maybe, deep down, I wasn't worthy of a love that didn't require so much sacrifice. But the more I thought about it, the more I understood that love should never feel like a sacrifice. True love doesn't ask you to give up who you are. True love doesn't demand you prove your worth over and over again. True love just is. That night, I made a decision. I had spent too long worrying about what Josh thought, what his friends thought, what the world thought. It was time for me to decide what I thought about myself. The next morning, I started looking into job opportunities outside of the U. I didn't know where I would go, or how I would rebuild my life, but I knew I had to leave. It wasn't running away, it was reclaiming my power. A few weeks later, my company offered me a position in Paris. It wasn't exactly what I had envisioned for myself, but it felt like the perfect opportunity to start fresh, to prove to myself that I was capable of more than just surviving in a broken relationship. I accepted the offer. I made the decision to leave behind everything that tied me to that painful chapter. Paris was waiting. The weeks leading up to my departure were a whirlwind of emotions. I packed my life into boxes, all the while trying to keep my composure. But it wasn't easy. I'd be lying if I said I didn't second-guess myself every now and then. Could I really leave behind everything I knew? Was this the right choice? What if I was making a mistake? But deep down, I knew I had to do it. I had to move on, not just from Josh, but from the version of myself that had been holding on to a life that wasn't serving me anymore. The day I left the U was a blur. I hugged my friends goodbye, tried not to cry as I boarded that flight, and in the back of my mind, I was still wondering if I was making the right decision. I landed in Paris with a mix of fear and excitement. It was all so new, so foreign. The language, the streets, the culture, everything was different. But in a strange way, It felt like I was finally where I was meant to be. I found a small apartment in the heart of the city. It wasn't much, but it was mine.
As beis where I could begin again.
I settled in, unpacked my things, and started to explore this new chapter of my life. The first few days were tough. I missed home. I missed the comfort of familiarity. I missed the person I thought I'd be spending my life with. But then something surprising happened. As the days passed, I started to feel at peace. Paris, in all its chaotic beauty, began to heal me in ways I didn't expect. I would wander through the streets, taking in the history and the beauty of the city, and slowly, the weight on my chest began to lift. I remember one evening, sitting at a cafe by the Seine River, sipping coffee, watching the world go by. I felt the first real sense of calm I had in months. I wasn't running away from my past. I was embracing my future. I began to take life in Paris one step at a time. I met new people, joined a few social groups, and started discovering the things I loved again, things I'd forgotten about in the chaos of the last year. One day, as I walked through the streets of Montmartre, I realized I was smiling. Not just a small smile, but a real, genuine smile. I hadn't smiled like that in a long time. A few weeks later, I received an email from my old company, offering me a role in their Paris office. It wasn't exactly the promotion I'd hoped for, but it was an opportunity to build something new, to finally have control over my future. I accepted it without hesitation. For the first time in years, I was doing things for myself. I was no longer tethered to someone else's dreams or insecurities. I was carving out a life that was just mine. But I also knew that there was more work to do. This wasn't just about rebuilding my career or finding a new place to live. This was about rediscovering who I was, without anyone else's expectations weighing me down. It wasn't going to be easy. I had to confront the parts of myself that had been shaped by doubt and fear. But every step I took felt like a step closer to becoming the person I was meant to be. And no matter what, I was going to make this work. For me. It's strange, you know, how a city can make you feel both small and large at the same time. Paris welcomed me with open arms, but also challenged me in ways I hadn't expected. The hustle and bustle of the city, the constant movement of people, the languages I didn't fully understand. It was overwhelming at first, but with every new corner I turned, with every cafe I stopped at, Paris began to feel like home.
I remember the first time I walked down the Champs-Élysées, feeling the chill of the Parisian air on my skin.
It was surreal. My mind was still filled with echoes of my life back in the U. But in that moment, something shifted inside me. I wasn't just walking through the streets of a new city. I was walking toward a new version of myself. In the first few weeks, I kept myself busy with work, exploring the city, and meeting new people. I didn't want to waste time mourning the past. I didn't want to keep looking back at the relationship with Josh, at the life we had planned. I had to look forward. One evening, I met a few colleagues for drinks. We sat outside at a cafe near the Eiffel Tower, laughing and talking about everything and nothing. For the first time since arriving, I felt like I was truly connecting with people again. It was in that moment that I realized I didn't need to have everything figured out. I didn't need to be perfect. I just needed to keep moving forward. I started spending more time with myself. I would walk along the Seine River, watching the boats glide by, and just breathe. I didn't need a relationship to define who I was anymore. I didn't need anyone's approval or validation. For the first time in a long time, I was enough. It was during one of those walks that I began to realize something important. I was free, not just free from Josh, but free from the fear that had been holding me back. Free from the toxic beliefs I had about myself, the ones that told me I wasn't worthy of love unless I proved it over and over again. I was starting to love myself again. One day, I decided to visit a local art gallery. I've always had a passion for art, something I had put aside for years. I wandered through the exhibits, taking in the paintings, the sculptures, the photographs. The experience was so personal, so intimate, that I couldn't help but feel moved. That day, I bought a small painting from a local artist. It wasn't expensive, but it felt significant, a symbol of this new chapter in my life. Paris wasn't just a city to me anymore. It was a place of transformation. It was a blank canvas where I could paint my own future, and I was ready to start. I was starting to see myself not as someone who had been broken, but as someone who had survived. Not as someone who had lost love, but as someone who had learned to love herself. And that, to me, was the most beautiful transformation of all. As time passed, Paris became more than just a city. It became a sanctuary, a place where I could rebuild, heal, and grow. And it was in this city, surrounded by unfamiliar streets and people, that I found something I thought I had lost, myself. It wasn't just the Parisian beauty or the culture that changed me. It was the space I created within myself. A space where I could finally breathe without the weight of someone else's expectations.
As beis where I could dream again.
I began to focus on my career. With the new job at the Paris office, I was able to throw myself into work, learning new things, meeting new people, and finally feeling the professional success I had always deserved. A few months into my new life, I started receiving messages from old friends and family. They were all asking how I was doing, how life in Paris was treating me. I answered their messages, telling them about my adventures and my newfound peace. But deep down, I knew that none of them could truly understand what I had gone through. They didn't know the struggles, the heartache, the self-doubt I had faced. They didn't know how much I had fought to get here. Then one day, I received a message from Josh. It was short, but it shook me. Ayu, I've been thinking a lot about everything.
I realize now that I hurt you. I'm sorry.
I was afraid, and I didn't know how to deal with it. I understand if you can't forgive me, but I wanted to say I'm sorry for what I did. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Part of me wanted to respond, to open up, to give him the closure he seemed to be asking for. But another part of me, the part that had been healing for months, felt nothing but a quiet calm. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I had already given myself the closure I needed. I didn't need Josh's apology to feel whole. I didn't need him to validate my worth. I had done that on my own. I moved forward with my life in Paris, and though there were days when I missed the version of myself that had once been part of a couple, I knew I was better off without the relationship that had held me back for so long. A year later, I found myself at another café by the Seine. I was sipping a glass of wine, looking out at the river as the sun began to set. The sky was painted with shades of pink and gold, and for a moment, I closed my eyes and simply took it all in. This was my life now, and I was finally truly at peace. I'm not saying that everything is perfect. I still have days where the past tries to creep in.
The insecurities, the doubts, the what ifs.
But I've learned to acknowledge them and then let them go. I've learned that my worth is not defined by anyone else, not by Josh, not by anyone. And as I look forward to my future, I can honestly say that I'm excited. I'm excited for the next adventure, for the next chapter of my life, and for the person I am becoming. I'm proud of the woman I am today, strong, independent, and unapologetically me. To anyone out there who feels lost, who feels like they're stuck in a relationship or situation that doesn't serve them, I want you to know this: you are enough. You are worthy of love that doesn't require you to prove your worth every single day. You are worthy of a life that makes you feel alive, not one that leaves you questioning everything about yourself. And remember, no matter where you are, no matter how far you feel from home, there is always a way to start over. That's the end of my story. Thank you for listening. I hope that by sharing this, someone out there can find the strength to take that first step towards a better, more fulfilling future. If you've been through something similar, if you've experienced heartbreak and found the courage to move on, I'd love to hear your story. You're not alone. We're all in this together.